Greetings once again. Welcome to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, the real news. We bring you analysis for fact and bias. We point out each. We make commentary. That's not the news. A lot of people that do this job honestly and truly believe that their opinion is news. I'm not one of them. Never have been, never will be. This show is about finding the truth. This show is about sharing information between all of us so that we can make better decisions in the voting booth, which is essential. We simply have to. The decisions we've made in the last election cycles or two have spoken for themselves. We are making huge mistakes. And it goes back further than that. We'll get to that a little bit later on here on the Wells Report. Want to say thank you very much for joining us on our chat. You can interact on this broadcast. You can be right there with us. You can call me at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can also join the chat room. Chat room is found where else but on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. So jump in. A lot of people have. Curtis King wins the chat room derby today. Lois Floyd's here. Let's see. Yeah, apparently there's some sort of a kerfuffle about buying whipped cream because apparently part of the propellant in whipped cream is nitrous oxide or laughing gas. And apparently what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to prove that you're 21 years of age or older to get whipping cream. Seriously? Goodness gracious. This is once again, this is big government run amok. If that's true, I haven't seen it yet, but I have no reason to disabuse any of these pieces of information from these wonderful people. Flem Coughley's around, Mike Renwee also. Gail Marlowe has shown up. Hello, Gail. Good to see you. Max Guadiano, the world's greatest U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant. I know this personally. I worked for him for years. Let's see what else. Okay. So a few years ago, in the run-up to the 2016 election, there was controversy surrounding Hillary Clinton. It became known that she had been jealously guarding her privacy while being a government employee. Specifically, the Secretary of State. And what she did not want to see splattered all over the media were things that were on her aides' Blackberries and emails and so on and so on. And so, eschewing, rejecting the idea of using a secret compartmented information facility in her own house, she repurposed a bathroom in her notable mansion at Chappaqua and put a computer server in there. And she used that computer server for any information that she deemed to be private. That particular server was subsequently penetrated by at least one hostile nation intelligence service. At least one. And finally, all the issues about it came tumbling out that there was top secret information on that server, 16 of them, 16 documents marked top secret or higher. And a careful perusal of the Espionage Act proved definitively that she had violated Section 7 of that act 16 times. James Comey held a July 26th press briefing. His conclusion was this, quote, although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. The Wall Street Journal editorial page has noted this, and they say, in other words, Ms. Clinton could have been indicted but wasn't. She absolutely could have been indicted. 16 counts of breaking Section 7 of the Espionage Act. Didn't happen. James Comey went on to say she was just stupid. She was just stupid. A former Secretary of State, just too stupid to realize that she was breaking the law. Of course, I've always heard that ignorance is no defense. If you don't know what the law is, if you are stupid, that doesn't mean you can't be prosecuted. But, well, she's Hillary Clinton. And her husband was Bill Clinton. So, Mrs. Clinton could have been indicted, but wasn't. And the Clinton email saga, where 33,000 emails that were demanded by the National Archives just simply disappeared. You know, where you wipe it like with a cloth? So the lecture from James Comey ended without a prosecution. The Wall Street Journal wrote at the time it was an outrageous usurpation of the FBI director, or by the FBI director, whose role was to investigate and turn evidence over to a U.S. attorney or the attorney general to decide on prosecution. He was letting the Democrat Justice Department off the hook for having to make its own judgment. Attorney General Loretta Lynch let Mr. Comey's judgment stand. After the press statement, Ms. Clinton was free to continue her run for the White House, and the press declared the issue put to rest. The decision was criticized at the time by the Wall Street Journal, but for better or worse, Mr. Comey and the Obama Justice Department had set the Clinton standard for treating prominent politicians who mishandled classified documents. Lesser public officials might have been prosecuted or at least sanctioned. Some were. But from then on, any such prosecution for comparable alleged offenses had to be made in light of the Comey-Lynch-Clinton precedent. Now, this all points directly to where we are with Donald Trump's handling of classified documents at his home at Mar-a-Lago. If Mrs. Clinton wasn't prosecuted, is there a different standard for Mr. Trump? Do you think there is? Is there or is there not? 817-379-2172. Is there a double standard for, say, for example, the Clinton political machine and former President Donald Trump when it comes to the DOJ, the FBI, and any number of intelligence services, etc.? You tell me. 817-379-2172. So, Mrs. Clinton was obliged to follow all the typical classification rules that apply to all government officials. As Mr. Comey said in his 2016 press statement, Ms. Clinton falsely claimed she had turned over all work-related emails to the state. But the FBI found several thousand work-related emails that weren't turned over. He also said Mrs. Clinton's lawyers hadn't even read Mrs. Clinton's lawyers hadn't even read her emails when deciding what to turn in. They relied on header information and search terms, and then cleaned their devices in such a way to preclude complete forensic recovery. That is a cover-up. Recall she also deliberately used private personal servers on which she conducted government business, penetrated by foreign intelligence services. All of this sounds familiar to the behavior the FBI says in its affidavit that suspects Mr. Trump, who may not have turned over all the documents the National Archives and FBI wanted. One complicating legal difference is that Mr. Trump operates under the Presidential Records Act, whose language assumes there will be some give and take between the archives and a former president over documents. It's always been that way, except President Trump. Because President Trump was in possession of things that could blow up several narratives about how terrible and awful President Trump actually was, and how he's a secret spy and any number of other things. And so they didn't want him to have a collection of those that he could release as he sees fit. What's fascinating about that is the FBI said, well, we need some leverage to be able to get this stuff done. And clearly, some of the materials that they were looking for, clearly, some of those materials were privileged pieces of information. And they were and continue to be. And so what ended up happening was, as a national archivist, not President Biden, not the Attorney General, nobody but a national archivist gave the FBI permission to override President Trump's executive privilege. That's going to end up in the federal court. It'll be an open and shut case. As soon as it gets to a federal court, they'll say, nope, there is presidential executive privilege. It extends to the vice president as well. Exhibit A, an Obama administration executive order saying so. Also regarding classification of documents. It's an open and shut case. But for some reason, it's dangling out there when everybody knows it's a complete farce. It's a complete farce. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, had none of those protections. None of them. And yet they're trying to throw this mud on President Trump. So, obviously, we don't know everything. This is from the Wall Street Journal opinion piece today. We don't know everything about the documents Mr. Trump retained, how he handled them, what he told the FBI, and other facts that are still hidden by the redactions in the affidavit, which are totally improper. Black out the names. That's all. Release the rest. Because what you did release did not establish probable cause for the FBI raid on August 8th. The raid heard around the world. New details may emerge that differ in significant ways from Mrs. Clinton's behavior, but I don't think so. It isn't evident so far. Mr. Lawyers will surely argue that under the PRA, the Presidential Records Act, he has rights to hold documents, even many that are classified for some period of time or some personal purpose. All this has to weigh on Merrick Garland and the Attorney General, or as the Attorney General considers whether to indict Mr. Trump for his handling of classified documents. We didn't like the Clinton standard, but we didn't establish it. A Democrat Justice Department did, and in a case with enormous political consequences. And here they are. Here they are. What does this mean to you? It may mean what your personal plans are at some point in the near future regarding all kinds of things. What's that all about? We'll discover it together on the Wells Report coming up in just a little bit. Again, my telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Join us on the chat. Join us on the chat. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Back with more of the Wells Report in just a moment. Thanks for joining us today. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Is there a two-tiered justice system to the benefit of Democrats and to the demise of former President Donald Trump? You tell me. Is there or is there not? And tell me why you think that way. Let's see what's going on here on the chat room. Okay, let's see. Let me yes. By the way, there was a little bit of a rumor going around that you're going to have to show an ID to get whipped cream because it has nitrous oxide in it. The kids are apparently inhaling it and laughing. We can't have that. All right, so here we go. So what are the comments so far? Gary says there's a D'Souza t-shirt that says, quote, "Hey, FBI, it should have been Hillary." And then goes on to say the FBI is a politicized weapon that favors the left. Intent is no defense in the case either. That was correct. Hillary Clinton's 16 top secret material breaches had nothing to do with intent. But James Comey said since there was no intent, there was no crime, which is garbage. So Mike says, yep, it's two-tiered justice. Max said two standards, always has been. Always? You think so? Always. I don't understand why have they all wanted to protect Clintons all these years. That's a great question. There is a spooky kind of an answer from somebody else who says Arkansas. We'll leave that alone. They've taken redaction to a whole nother level. They should have bought stock in black Sharpie pens and ink cartridges. Cleo says, I have a few minutes to listen to JD and he's not there. I should go to Vegas with these odds. What are you talking about, Cleo? Good heavens to Betsy. I'm right here. Redact, what a waste of school supplies, indeed. Also want to say hi to Michelle Larrabee and Jesse. Thanks very much for joining us. This is a very interesting box that Democrats find themselves in. I believe personally, so I'll switch over here. I believe personally that this unbelievable twisting of America's law enforcement comes from several different sources. And all of them political, all of them inspired by, empowered by politics. Things that should not be. Things that should not be encased in politics in any way, shape, or form. And we're going to have to do some very serious reckoning to get this country back to something that more resembles the home of the free, the land of the free, and the home of the brave. We'd better get that done. I'll have some thoughts on that in the next half hour. But what we have here is we have blatant double standards, blatant partisan bias in the national law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies and the security agencies. The administrative state is trying out their power. And we need to corral it very, very quickly before it's too late. This is how the Soviet Union was born. This is how East Germany became East Germany. That's how all of these socialist totalitarian states, including Red China, the People's Republic of China, this is how it all happened. It is a society to the benefit of the ruling political class. And the rest of us be damned. There's more. It's coming up too. This is the Wells Report. Like I said, I'll explain some of the root causes of all of this and what needs to be done next. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. In the last 20 years, the groundwork was laid for the nation we have today. Give or take a few years. And what we have is we have a widening gulf between the people of the United States, protected by the Constitution and Bill of Rights of the United States, and the ruling class. The ruling class supported by the administrative state, also known as the deep state, although the deep state is defined pretty much as the administrative state that deals with the Department of Homeland Security, CIA, NSA, IRS, and the FBI, the DOJ. And this was all set up with something called the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act reorganized government into a security state. Why? Well, because we needed to, at the time, the thought was, I'm not saying we needed to, because none of this worked to the benefit of the nation of the United States in any way. What ended up happening is that we created an opportunity by breaking down the barriers between international intelligence, CIA, NSA, and domestic security and law enforcement agencies, backed up by the IRS and the mainstream media. We set this all up to create a safer society, completely ignoring the idea that when you trade security or safety for freedom and liberty, you will end up losing freedom and liberty. And that is exactly what's happening. When the administrative state regulations supersede the U.S. code, the laws of the land, and as these executive branch agencies are political in nature, supported by, shall we say, bureaucratic protection of government workers' unions. When you set all this stuff up, what you end up with is a circumvention of our actual government to the benefit of the security state. We're all under surveillance. We have no Fourth Amendment protections. None. There are attacks on the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, due process. All of it. All set up by this idea that we needed more security and we needed more safety because, golly, a bunch of guys flew airplanes into our buildings, killed 3,000 of us, more than died in Pearl Harbor, and the United States engaged in World War II because of that attack. We ended up jumping into a 20-year war against terror. And the reason that we ended up in a war against terror is because, gosh, we just didn't have the same kinds of enemies that we had in the Second World War. We were dealing with nation states. Now we're dealing with ideology and different cultural standards between the peoples of the United States and the world. And so we find ourselves in a position where the workers' unions protect those in the administrative state. The administrative state, empowered by information from international intelligence agencies that now dabble in domestic intelligence. Federal law enforcement nurtured by that same data. egregious violations of constitutional rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights, and a mainstream media providing the lubrication for everything that happens that is extra constitutional. As we protect the administrative state through government workers' unions, the media protects the political process regarding their own particular political bent, which is in league with all of the rest of this. And so those people that are outside of that circle, easily defined by the numbers of people who voted for President Trump in the 2020 election, 74 million strong, completely outside the protections of the Constitution, the administrative state and their protections, the political state and their protections, the media. And so what we have here is we have this grotesque warpage of the founding documents that created the greatest nation in the history of the human endeavor. And the elite that were created, or the elite that was created, by this confluence of events based on an outrageous atrocity. All of this now leads us to where we are. Where if you are part of the administrative state, the government state, the mainstream media, and all of the rest that I've just been talking about, you're perfectly safe as long as your politics coincide with theirs. The President of the United States called those of us on the outside of that bubble fascists the other day, trying to demonize the free people of the United States. The people who saw around all of this in 2016 and elected their own president outside of the state. The state being called the swamp at the time. But now as we see this coalescence of all of these factors, all of these organizations, all of this protection society, imposing a security society on the rest of us, the demonization of us serves to create more of the same, not less. What's interesting to me is how stupid they were to go ahead and identify a true threat to all of it that exists around one man, and that is Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. And then what they ended up doing was, as they had done so many times with people not in the white hot spotlight of governmental power, as elected by the people of the United States, they showed up and started taking out in the early dawn hours with tactical equipment and machine guns and this grotesque warpage of the theoretical laws of the land as seen through a political lens. Suddenly they started hammering those people, throwing them in jail, creating a class of political prisoners, threatening to create a class of political martyrs. Completely blowing off, completely disregarding the people of the United States outside of their power bubble. And so what they ended up doing was taking those people's champion and doing the things that had become routine practice for the security state. And in the pre-dawn hours of August 8th, what ended up happening is that tactical guys, FBI guys, decided to ransack the 45th president of the United States' private home in this warpage of American law, using the language of the Fourth Amendment regarding probable cause, oath, affirmation, specificity, and trying to make that political exercise a legal one. But as the administrative state and the political state had been one corrupt organization washing the hands of the other, they've set up a dichotomy that cannot be ignored. The Clinton standard and the Trump standard. The governmental standard and the people's standard. Oh, make no mistake. There had been these pre-dawn raids in other people's homes, people you never heard of, never will. Were they sent to jail? Sure. Are they political prisoners? Maybe. Since we don't know anything about it, and since a mainstream media refuses to cover any of those egregious violations, although some poked out. Waco, Ruby Ridge. Those were basically confined to the nutcase class. Now what we have is FBI involvement in the fomenting of and the encouragement of plots to what? Kidnap a sitting governor of a United States, a state of the United States? And they're in the middle of it. 2/3 of the people involved found innocent because they were entrapped by the FBI. And then, of course, the inescapable idea that a sitting president somehow has the right to rescind the executive privilege of a previous president. And then we find out that didn't happen either because, well, the President's Club has a completely different set of rules. And you don't want to rupture those. Remember, I said, what are we going to do when we decide to rescind President Biden's executive privilege and start going through those documents? A couple of questions that I have, for example, I wonder what kind of shall we say, drug therapies President Biden is on. Trying to figure out just exactly who's running the American government because it sure as hell isn't President Biden. Are we going to find out all that information? Are we going to find out the people behind the Biden administration giving the Biden administration all their direction, marching orders, et cetera, et cetera? Or will things change again because the administrative state, the media, washing the hands of the political elite, cleansing their political destruction of American law? So what are we going to see? Who knows? But let's get back to the 74 million. What are they going to do with us? At this particular moment, they believe they can do anything they choose. This, by the way, creates another little part of this very serious intertwining web. Those people theoretically empowered by the 74 million, the Republican Party, now doing their absolute dead level best to explain why they're going to lose the 2022 election. Well, you know, that red wave we've been talking about doesn't look like it's going to happen. What? Where's that coming from? What are they going to do with 74 million votes to the contrary of their political delirium? Are they just going to wish them away? Are they going to validate and verify that there was indeed a problem with the 2020 election? The only thing that we need to do as the 74 million is to decide amongst ourselves just exactly who we're going to vote for. And 74 million votes for everything that 74 million votes can be voted for would be very, very difficult to explain just how those votes disappeared. So why do I do what I do? To have conversations like this with you. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells, discussing the origination of the security/administrative/deep state we currently live in, deconstructing the steps being taken. What can we do to change it? We, the people of the United States, having been neatly divided along all kinds of fascist lines, listening to those who are the author of that particular tactic, charging us with what they themselves actually are. What can we do? Well, in the time-honored path of Americans before us, we must stand together. We must stand together. We must identify who the true problem people are. And who are those problem people? Aside from the people that I've already mentioned, the Democrat Party, the administrative state, the deep state, the security state, federal employee unions, the mainstream media. Aside from that, who else? Those people that, in an ulterior and kind of greasy way, assure us that they're fighting for our standards. They call themselves Republicans. They say that the Republican Party is the greatest steward of conservative political thought in the United States. And yet these are the same people. These are the same people that are now saying, well, we just might not have that red wave. Really? Has anything that President Biden has done changed your mind about how you're going to vote in 2022? Hasn't changed mine. They're talking about, my gosh, there was zero inflation in the month of July. No, there wasn't zero inflation. There was a 0% increase. Inflation is still at 8.5%. 8.5%. The cynical abuse of American intelligence, saying things like, well, we'll never raise taxes on the middle class. Well, that's what inflation is. It was calculated. How do we know it was calculated? Well, because all you really have to do is isolate whatever products we simply can't live without. And then, of course, energy. And so what we end up doing is we end up charging energy prices that are outlandish. We don't have to go back far to realize that they are outlandish, because barely 2 years ago we were exporting energy. Now we're having to go and try to collect it from other places hostile to us. It's a national security issue. But that's all being set aside for the sake of politics, because the prices are high, which means the taxes being collected on the high prices are also high. This is the same government that says, my goodness gracious, we're cutting $1.7 trillion out of the budget deficit, as they immediately spend $1.7 trillion on getting rid of debt owed the American people from the very college kids that are going to end up perpetuating the security state, the administrative state, the deep state. Oh, it's a wonderful little machine. Except it's not a machine, not a wondrous little machine. It's a gigantic, monstrous, grotesque machine. And we, the people, are the only thing standing between that machine destroying the Constitution and the country we know in favor of the country they want. We're the only ones. And they seem to be serious about it. We must immediately replace these fake champions of conservative thought. The Republican Party is feckless. They say, my gosh, give us the power and we'll do the right thing. Yeah, okay. I don't believe you. I simply don't believe you. I haven't heard anything convincing except that what you're going to do, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I haven't seen anything that actually proves the metal, the steel behind those words. And your track record of blowing off steely words, the overturning of Obamacare, for example, that track record, it goes back far beyond that. Doesn't convince me. So we, the people, the 74 million, have a clear mandate of action. A clear mandate of action. We must elect people that feel as we do, instead of people who say they feel as we do. We have to elect the people that actually are ourselves. And it's not just failing our politics. If we somehow screw this up, we'll fail the greatest nation in the history of the human endeavor. And we just can't do that. This is the Wells Report. That's hour number one. Hour number two is next. And I will see you imminently. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do you get out of this broadcast? The real news. The news of the day. We take the news, we report it. We analyze that news for fact and bias. We point out each. Then there's commentary, which is not the news. It's simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours, which leads us to debate. We debate everything you hear on this broadcast. Available to you via chat, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, others. And you can do that on our chat room, Rollicking Today. Or you can call me at 817-379-2172 right this minute. You can call me on the telephone and give me your ideas. What do you think to be the case? Your opinion. We'll discuss it. We'll research it. We'll have more truth at the end of this broadcast than we start with. And it's truth that we simply must pay attention to. It's truth we must act on, but not in the ways that some are essentially trying to lead us toward. More about that in just a moment. Last hour, in case you missed it, we discussed the grotesque warpage of American law for political means. We discussed the security state, the administrative state, the deep state, and the agency that makes it all somewhat or theoretically palatable for the mass consumption that we call news, which is most assuredly not the case. Propaganda at best. Insidious lies at worst. Listen carefully. The Justice Department today will file publicly in court response to former President Donald Trump's bid for a special master to oversee the FBI review of materials seized in the Mar-a-Lago search. The agency granted permission by Judge Eileen Cannon of the Southern District of Florida to file up to 40 pages after it said the 20-page limit set by the local rules of the court was not sufficient to adequately address the legal and factual issues raised by President Trump's filing. Now remember, there was an affidavit that somehow theoretically provided probable cause for the outrageous, completely inappropriate raid on Mar-a-Lago on the 8th of August. Papers were seized 2 years after they had been given to President Trump by the Government Accounting Office. 2 years, or nearly. But somehow it was so important that those papers somehow be returned to the National Archives. It was so important that a pre-dawn raid on a former president's private residence was undertaken by this monstrosity of the security state. They now hold all those papers and can do with them as they choose, unless Judge Eileen Cannon of the Southern District of Florida, a federal judge this time, not a magistrate, acts in accordance with not just the fashionable warpage of plain language that is found in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States in favor of politics. If she does not allow someone independent, someone outside the bubble of this monstrosity that I've described, then Donald Trump may very well end up being America's first former president political martyr. The only thing that stands between us and them, us and this administrative state, is a vote, not just in 2022, but in 2024 and beyond. assuming, of course, those votes even matter. Those votes must reaffirm in the supposed party of conservatism, the Republican Party, that that's what they should be pursuing. The absolute stiffening of the Constitution and what that actually means. The return to a nation of laws, not of politics. The cleansing of federal law enforcement, federal security, the federal administrative state, the removal of federal worker unions, which are nothing more than leftist political organizations with enforced dues being used to destroy the nation. And we must turn away from a media that makes at least all of these people that somehow believe that their version of the United States, at dramatic odds with the ones in papers written by the greatest political minds of the 18th century, prescribe and demand. And it comes down to Judge Eileen Cannon to at least provide some kind of fairness to an unfair political process, a fairness mandated by federal law based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. She is a Trump appointee. But what's fascinating to me is a supposed security organization, a supposed law enforcement agency, does everything it possibly can to protect itself from transparency and public scrutiny of its actions. We don't need a conspiracy theory. All we need is just seeing what they show us. They fight against transparency? Put the affidavit out. Put the affidavit out there. And so they did in this even comical, in a dreadful way, this dreadful comedy of a redacted affidavit, which simply does not express the absolute requirements necessary for their actions. And somehow the mainstream media thinks that's okay. President Trump now says we need a special master. Judge Cannon did not set a specific deadline for the Justice Department filing beyond requesting it on or before today. The judge also ordered the agency to file under seal more details about what it seized from President Trump's resort, and a notice laying out the status of its review of the materials. Trump must file his reply to the Justice Department by 8 p.m. tomorrow night, per Judge Cannon's orders, and the judge has scheduled a hearing for Thursday to consider Trump's request for a special master, a third-party attorney appointed by the court to oversee a certain part of this case. Notably, Cannon has already signaled preliminary intent to grant Trump's request, which could bring new complications to a DOJ, a Department of Justice, ensnared in its own machinations. This so-called closed-off investigation. Well, we can't compromise our sources and methods. We can't compromise the identities of these people that are providing us with these flimsy tools that we use to justify our actions. We can't be transparent. And then, when the absolute target of all of this insidiousness, President Trump himself, asks for fairness, 20 pages of argument just simply isn't enough. We need 40 pages of argument. We must continue to fight to keep from the American people any kind of fair process for the 45th President of the United States, who is nothing more than a symbol for what happens next, should that fairness fail. Cannon has already signaled preliminary intent. That will complicate the DOJ's mess. President Trump's legal team is broadly arguing a special master is necessary to ensure the Justice Department returns private documents seized during the search of Mar-a-Lago. They've already admitted the fact that they took things that were not anywhere close to what they said they were looking for. They've taken privileged information, not just executive privileged information, but attorney-client privileged information. You and I will probably never, ever have the protections of executive privilege. But the rupture of attorney-client privilege touches all of us, every single one of us. And should we fail to demand that that be protected, they win. The Justice Department has already signaled that it is using an internal filter team to review the seized items and separate material that could be subject to privilege claims. Let me see if I can translate that for you. We're going to find anything that we can possibly use to bolster our flimsy case for our actions. And we're going to delete that information that proves that we have been acting outside the realm of American law and constitutional practice. On Monday, the agency said it identified a limited set of materials from its search of documents taken from Mar-a-Lago that potentially contain material covered by attorney-client privilege. It's in the process of addressing privilege disputes. They should have done that before all these papers were absconded with, not after. And so, this insidious attack on Fourth Amendment protections in the Bill of Rights against President Trump continues. Now, what else is continuing? Well, should this go dangerously awry, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has stepped up and warns of riots in the street if President Trump is prosecuted, and points out the double standard we've been discussing during this broadcast. Riots in the streets. You see, when the left has riots in the streets, they're simply peaceful protests, the reporting of which from the machine media, saying, it's mostly a peaceful protest with a building burning in the background, with police officers' eyes being burned by lasers, attempted murder, actual murder, looting, theft, assault. And so Lindsey Graham warns of riots in the streets. You know, it really doesn't make any difference what we do. They will be described as riots in the streets for the sake of politics, or not. More about that in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Lindsey Graham said this, quote, if they try to prosecute President Trump for mishandling classified information after Hillary Clinton set up a server in her basement, there literally will be riots in the street. He made this warning on Fox News Sunday night in America. He then went on to say that he worries about the country. Graham referenced Clinton's email handling while serving as Secretary of State. Clinton's use of a private server was under investigation. The FBI concluded there was no mishandling of classified information. Graham argued the double standard when it comes to Trump. According to Graham, he and many other Republicans believe that when it comes to the former president, there are no laws. It's only about getting him. President Trump is famously known to have said, it's not me they're after. It's you, meaning us. And he is completely correct. They've already done it. During the Obama administration, the persecution of conservative 501c3s by the IRS. The other day, an Amish farmer was somehow created as running afoul of the law because he was providing meat for his community. The unbelievable, grotesque abuse by the EPA. Even the Federal Elections Commission. All of it. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Shortly after Senator Graham commented, President Trump posted his video clip of Graham's comments on his Truth Social platform. Mary McCord, a former official of the Department of Justice, criticized Graham's comments on CNN. I think it's incredibly irresponsible for an elected official to basically make veiled threats of violence just if law enforcement and the Department of Justice and the grand jury does their jobs. It depends on what jobs you're talking about, Ms. McCord. If they're talking about doing a political hit job, you've got a problem. And I also noticed you didn't make that statement when politicians of the other side, inside the bubble, inside the insidious, destructive American bubble, the destruction of America bubble. I noticed when people were running in the streets, there were riots in the streets, you didn't say much. It's that double standard again, that hypocrisy. The interesting thing about hypocrisy is it's a double-edged sword. It can get us. Certainly it can. The double standard is a double-edged sword. It can get us. But it can also get you. By the way, I got this from USA Today and the New York Times. Will there be riots in the streets? I certainly hope not, especially since there's a far more effective way to stop it, to stop all of this. A far more effective way. A way that not only stops this insidious, grotesque abuse of the greatest nation on earth for political ideologies, but it also, as their remedy to what we should do, makes itself apparent. All it will do is reinforce the truth of the matter. John David, just exactly what are you talking about? Well, I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. You know, I've said many, many times that when it comes time for the people of the United States to act, we'll know. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. I'll explain in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Back with more next. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Find us on chat, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. On Sunday night, this from the Guardian. This is an offshore, an overseas news organization, which I think is highly indicative of something I said earlier today, which is when it comes to these cabals of the current security state, the administrative state, the deep state, the security state, the mainstream media in the United States not covering this story. Sunday night, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham predicted riots in the streets if Trump is indicted over his retention of classified documents after leaving the White House 2 years ago. Materials recovered by the FBI at President Trump's home this month. Yes, Lindsey Graham earned a widespread rebuke. Mary McCord, I already discussed, said it was incredibly irresponsible for an elected official to basically make veiled threats of violence. Just if law enforcement and the Department of Justice does their jobs. It's not their job. Politics isn't handled in a courtroom. Politics is handled in a voting booth. And so against this backdrop comes the news from The Guardian that more than 2/5 of Americans believe civil war is at least somewhat likely in the next 10 years. The survey comes from YouGov America. I've got it right here. McCord says, saying that people are angry, they may be violent, showed what President Trump knows and what Lindsey Graham also knows, is people listen to that and people actually mobilize and do things. Yes, we know that to be true because leftist politicians made that happen during the summer of 2020 in the run-up to the 2020 election. That's exactly what they did. And then she goes on to say January 6th was the result of this same tactic by President Trump and his allies. You mean the people of the United States? He does have a lot of allies, 74 million and counting. 9 deaths, including suicides among police officers, have been linked to the Capitol attack. President Trump told them to fight like hell to overturn his defeat by Joe Biden, according to this article. Political violence, the fears of that have grown. Well, why wouldn't they? The left has no problem whatsoever using political violence. We've seen them do it. Most experts believe a full-scale armed conflict like the American Civil War of 1861 and 1865 remains unlikely. Oh, yeah? But many fear an increase of jagged political division and explicitly political violence, particularly as Republican politicians who support Trump's lie about electoral fraud run for Congress and are elected, governors' mansions, and key state election posts. This month, Rachel Kleinfeld, a specialist in civil conflict at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, told The Guardian, quote, countries with democracies and countries as strong as America's do not fall into civil war, but if our institutions weaken, the story could be different. How could the institutions be any weaker than they are now? Subjugated, warped, stained, poisoned by politics. How could they be weakened anymore? In the poll by YouGov and The Economist, 65% of all respondents said political violence had increased since the start of 2021. Slightly fewer, 62%. Thought political violence would increase in the next few years. Participants also asked, looking ahead to the next 10 years, how likely do you think that there will be a civil war in the country? Among all U.S. citizens, 43% said civil war was at least somewhat likely. Among strong Democrats and independents, the figure was 40%. Whoa. Among strong Republicans, 54% said civil war was at least somewhat likely. Do you agree? Is civil war at least somewhat likely? I hope not. But it doesn't take a civil war. It takes civil action. My God, John Wells, what are you espousing as this civil action? Nothing. That's what I'm espousing. Absolutely nothing. We prepare for a conflict that we fight with absolutely nothing. Let's, as a thought experiment, pick January 1st, 2023. On that day, after preparing for the balance of this year, the American people stop. We just stop. We don't go to work. We don't go to the grocery store. We don't buy gasoline. We don't do anything. We stay home. Play with the kids. Discover the joy of taking beans out of a small oil can that's been repurposed to hold food and figure out how to cook them so that they're delicious. My dad could do that. Just hard beans. You just take hard beans and turn them into a delicious meal. We do nothing. We don't pay bills. We don't do anything. We stay home. That's all we do. We do what was done to us. We grind the entire nation to a halt. We refuse. We refuse to take part in the destruction of this nation. That's what we do. What are they going to do? Arrest you for doing nothing? I mean, you get your AR-15 and you form yourselves into neighborhood militias, and there will be skirmishes and so on and so on and so on. But if you don't do anything, what are they going to arrest you for? You see, a lot of civil disobedience requires action. The great strength of the United States is the production of its people. What we do is amazing. We believe in this nation. We love this nation. We care about this nation. We work hard for this nation. But if this nation no longer exists, thanks to the administrative state, the deep state, the security state, and the mainstream media that does the razzmatazz of keeping it all moving forward to the satisfaction of the three groups that I just mentioned, they don't have anything to work with if we don't provide it. And so we shouldn't go out in our front yard and defend from all comers. And if they break down the door, what are they breaking down the door for? Of course, these are questions President Trump is asking right now. President Trump has exposed this malevolence in the United States government. He started with the malevolence of the Republican Party. arguing vociferously that they are the harbingers and the defenders of conservative political thought of small government and small taxes. Not so frickin' much. They're charlatans. Lindsey Graham is warning us of riots in the streets. Excuse me, sir, but if you had done your job to defend the people's president, you wouldn't have to worry about any of this stuff now, would you? If you had done your job, this terrible eventuality that you foresee would not happen. But you didn't, did you? But in the time-honored way of Republicans looking good but not actually being good, you said, my goodness, there are going to be riots in the streets. I didn't do anything to stop it years ago when I could have. When they started pulling off all this garbage against President Trump, I could have stopped it cold, but I didn't do it. Well, I said I was going to do something as long as the cameras were on. But when the news story was over with, I just sort of sat on my hands and twiddled my thumbs. Sort of like what we need to do. They're showing us exactly what we need to do. Nothing. We just stop. It's the nothing revolution. And as I've said, President Trump has shown the light in all the deep, nasty corners of the malevolent swamp that tells us how to live and how we will live. What will it look like when they show up and knock on your door and say, you've got to go to work? No, thanks. The only thing that should be on your calendar is your next vote. And the rest of it is just letting them paddle in their own demise. Their self-created mess. Just let them live in it. Well, I have to fly. I have to fly to some climate change conference in Iceland. What do you mean there are no pilots? Oh, you've got a pilot. That's great. Well, let's fuel up and go. There's nobody running the gas pumps? Well, now wait a minute. Well, let's call out somebody to get somebody to pump some gas. What do you mean they're not answering their phone? How big do you think the panic would be? How long would it take? I'm thinking about 30 days. Before the President of the United States reads his teleprompter with the words, I'm begging you to go back to work. No thanks. You didn't have any problem with 90 million people deciding not to work during the Obama administration. All we're doing is just following through on what is acceptable policy for you. Okay. During COVID-19, you wanted us to stay home. We're just agreeing. We're going to give you what you want. We will stop. What do you mean you can't flush the toilet? What do you mean there's no water pressure? We'll just get a bucket of water. What do you mean from where? Go down to the store and bar. Oh. I'm telling you. In the experience of the past, it's called a general strike. But remember, regardless of what they'll tell you, regardless of what they say about you, regardless of any of the things they threaten you with. They are powerless to stop nothing. They're only powerful if you give them that power. What are they when you take it away? They're a bunch of greasy, ulterior, two-faced hypocrites talking about how great they are and how stupid everybody is around them. As they sit there and drink their single malt. Oh, wait, they can't get any single malt because Total Wine is closed. Couldn't get anybody to go to work. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. What do you think? What do you think about the nothing revolution? Once again, these people are empowered by chaos, riots in the streets, people walking around with weapons, forming themselves into militia groups. They're empowered by that. What are they empowered by? Someone sitting at home, enjoying their food storehouse. What are they empowered by? Nothing. They're not empowered. They're depowered. See, these people win when they lure us into the fight, and we acquiesce. What if someone gave a war and nobody came? Instead of a battlefield, you have a field. And they show up and say, you've got to go to work. You've got to go to work. No, I don't. We'll arrest you. Okay. What are you going to feed us? One of the easiest things there is outsmarting a politician. Because let's face it, they're not too smart. I mean, we know they're not smart because we never see their SAT scores. Ever. And we also know they're not smart because they see things through a political lens, distance from reality. If we show them nothing, that's reality. What are they going to do? Nothing. All we have to do is take an extended vacation. But we have to be prepared for it. There are certain people that can't obviously take part in the nothing revolution. Water is kind of important. I mean, so we'd have to think this through, but fortunately, I think we're smart enough to think it through. Why don't we? We have to fight in a way they can't win. It's Sun Tzu. This is no mystery. You provide a battle scenario that they can't win. They can't even come close to winning. And all that really needs to happen is nothing. We put these people in office. Those who should defend us are not. Those who are trying to exploit us are. We must remove both of those groups of people, not through means of violence, because that empowers them. My God, they're going to run in the streets. They're going to be riots. Holy crap. We better call out the National Guard. Or, my God, they're staying at home and not doing anything. We better call out the, who do we call out? I wonder who we get. Good luck with that. By the way, this has been done around the world. The Netherlands is a perfect example. The government said, we want all your farmland, and they said, okay, you can have it. And they took their tractors and put them in the streets and stopped all the traffic. The nothing revolution. They started arresting people for bringing these truckers in Canada food. They started arresting them. What does that say about the Canadian government? It says everything that needs to be said. That's what it says. Got to be smarter than politicians. You got to be smarter than totalitarians. You've got to be smarter than those who believe they're smarter than you. And their first idiotic, stupid mistake is believing that they are smarter than you. Are you listening? Are you hearing this? I sure hope so. Because this is how you win. Everything else is how you perpetuate and indeed coerce totalitarianism in our time. Don't do it. This is the Wells Report. Back for hour 3 in a moment. All right. God bless all y'all. See you in a sec. north to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I report the news. Then I analyze the news for fact and bias. I point out both. I make commentary. That is not the news. Not intended to be the news. It's simply my opinion. Just as valuable as yours, to be sure. And then we debate. We debate the news. We debate the facts, the bias. We debate the commentary. We absolutely do. Lots of different ways to do it. May I suggest the chat room going on right this very moment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch? Please do that. Lots of people there right now going after it. Curtis says, take away their ridiculous salaries, talking about these security state, administrative state personnel, the mainstream media. Take away their salaries, and Americans could save a lot of money. They sure could. Yeah. Pompeo warns the chances are likely of another 9/11 attack. Why not? What's to stop them? The TSA? You know, that's a department of the Department of Homeland Security, don't you? You know, that behemoth that was created during the Patriot Act of 2002? Yeah. Yeah, of course. There are all kinds of things happening. That's from the chat room. So the other day, something really amazing happened. Mark Zuckerberg was talking with a colleague of mine, Joe Rogan. It happened August 25th. Ahead of the 2020 election, the FBI told Facebook to watch out for possible Russian propaganda, advising them to be vigilant because something was about to come out. As a result, Zuckerberg admitted that Facebook limited the visibility of articles regarding Hunter Biden's laptop. Yeah, Mark, your politics are showing. Yeah, really ugly. Although you noted users could still share the articles, you clarified the number of users who could see them, and you decreased them by a meaningful amount, or you could decrease them by a meaningful amount, said the letter. In light of Zuckerberg opening up, the senators, specifically Senator Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, are calling on Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to turn over communications between those government agencies and Facebook employees regarding Hunter Biden after Zuckerberg admitted that his company censored news articles about the president's son after the FBI reached out. So you still think that the FBI is something akin to a law enforcement agency? Or is it now the Democrat Party secret police? Do we have the Biden administration or do we have the Biden regime? Because only regimes have secret police. You tell me. 817-379-2172. In a letter to Zuckerberg sent Monday, I just referenced it, the senator said the CEO's recent revelation that the FBI told Facebook employees to be on high alert for Russian propaganda before the 2020 election raised new questions after a whistleblower previously alleged the FBI worked to downplay stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. The American people deserve to know whether the FBI used Facebook as part of their alleged plan to discredit information about Hunter Biden, said the letter, obtained and published by the New York Post. If so, the Congress and the American people require clarity with respect to the extent the FBI communicated with Facebook during the 2020 election about Hunter Biden-related information. In the United States, the First Amendment talks about free speech. It's interesting free speech is only really within earshot. Now, make no mistake, there are medias that are available for people to put their points of view out. Newspapers, television stations, radio stations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the new age, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. So if you can control what is seen on those platforms, well, you control free speech in America, don't you? And the FBI is reaching out to Facebook to say, hey, beware of this Russian propaganda. And guess what they called Hunter Biden's laptop? Russian disinformation. Zuckerberg goes, well, this is Russian disinformation. We can't allow people to communicate about it. But just like every other insidious, dishonest swindle of the American public, well, the truth comes out. The truth comes out. Oh, make no mistake, there are companies that refuse to play ball. Apple refused to give the FBI its algorithm codes protecting the privacy of people that own their iPhones. So they went to a hacker who figured it out for them. But at least Apple didn't play ball. What did Facebook do? Yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir. We will absolutely curtail any mention of Hunter Biden's laptop because, well, it could be Russian disinformation. We now know it was not Russian disinformation at all. It was reality. Have we done anything with it? No, because the FBI still has it. But then they made that mistake about going into Mar-a-Lago and trying to treat President Trump like they should have treated Hunter Biden. But they didn't do that. Why? Well, because they wanted to get Joe Biden elected. That's why. And if all this Hunter Biden vomit splashed all over Joe Biden's suit, 10% for the big guy, then that election may have been a lot harder to pull off. The American people deserve to know whether the FBI used Facebook. Not to talk about what the FBI is doing, but to stop Facebook from letting anybody else talk about what the FBI wasn't doing. Oops! And Facebook played ball. You know what that means? That means that Facebook can do one of two things. They can either face prosecution for violating the constitutional rights of the people of the United States, or they can stop violating the constitutional rights of the people of the United States. I wonder which one they'll choose. You know, it's interesting because Facebook's always been good to me. Facebook's always provided me with this platform. The platform that I use every single day. They've always done it. They haven't stopped me from talking about the things I talk about because I'm not espousing, all this political gobbledygook. I'm just simply reporting the news. That's all I'm doing. And I'm using much of the same news that other people who propagandize the news put out. I just depropagandize it. What are they going to do? We took John David off Facebook because he was telling the truth? Yeah. You see, that the FBI would reach out to Facebook and that Facebook would play ball proves everything I've been saying in the 2 hours before this one on the Wells Report. Everything. This is a seminal moment here in the United States. We must be able to communicate amongst ourselves. Because it's not just freedom of speech, which is only within earshot. It's also a free press. Facebook is part of that free press. Arguably, it is the new free press of the new century. They have proven that they're unable to be constitutionally compliant of their own volition. Self-governance requires self-discipline. They don't have it. They don't have somebody at the top saying, okay, listen, before we put this policy in place, what does the Constitution say? Anybody? Well, hell, boss, we don't know. You've never read the Constitution? It's only 4 pages. You haven't. You don't know what you're talking about? You don't have any idea what I'm talking about. Well, let's just go over the Bill of Rights, shall we? What is our company policy, since we are essentially the biggest communication company in the history of this nation, if not the entire world? Just exactly how many of these constitutional rights and the Bill of Rights are we violating today? I've made this abundantly clear. If I had anything to do with governance in the United States, I'd not be worried about the climate or trying to control the weather. Hell, they can't even control a checkbook. They're trying to control the weather? Pass. No, I'd be trying to pass a law that says if you do business as a corporation in the United States, you will be constitutionally compliant. I suggest you hire a CCO, a constitutional compliance officer. Put him in the C level of your corporation and make sure that you're not running afoul of the constitutional rights of the people of the United States. Do you have any idea how our country would change if that law was in effect right this minute? Imagine working for your company that was, as a matter of law, forced to comply with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Facebook's working with the secret police, the enforcement arm of the Biden regime. Or in the case of this particular story, the leftist regime, because President Biden wasn't elected yet. The FBI reaches out to Facebook and says, hey, be careful. There's some stuff coming out and it's Russian disinformation. Uh-huh. How's it feel to get screwed by the FBI? Because you have been. I don't even know what Mark Zuckerberg's doing. Maybe he's just panicking, saying, oh my God, what have I done? Exactly. What have you done, Mark Zuckerberg? This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. There's a play by Eugene O'Neill called The Iceman Cometh, where suddenly a whole bunch of people living in a flop house, arguably the FBI. In the play, they're all alcoholics. In the FBI, they're addicted to power. There are a few whistleblowers that suddenly realize their sobriety, and they start pointing out people that never will. One of those persons that never will ever either admit or rectify his addiction to power is former FBI Special Agent in Charge, Timothy Tebow. Yeah, he has left the FBI. Why? Well, because the Iceman cometh. Because suddenly truth is catching up. He's been accused of bias in handling the investigation into Hunter Biden's laptop. And after he was using that bias to keep that story under wraps, thanks to a friendly big tech CEO who played ball, he was then put in charge of the January 6th insurrection, which was nothing more than a peaceful protest. Far more peaceful than the BLM protests of the summer before. Oh, much more. Yeah, he's left the bureau. FBI Assistant Special in Charge Timothy Tebow retired over the weekend. Yeah, that's because congressional subpoenas are coming. He's going to have to testify under oath. He wants to make sure he has a retirement before the Iceman cometh. He was walked out of the building. That's standard practice. His name has been in the news for bias and allegations that he tried to run interference in the Hunter Biden investigation, which he did. Tebow was named by Senate Judiciary Ranking Member Chuck Grassley in a July 18th letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland. Grassley cited whistleblowers who alleged a pattern of political bias from high-ranking officials. That's not hard to trace. According to Grassley, the whistleblower said the DOJ and the FBI must follow strict, substantial, factual predication guidelines to open an investigation, and that Tebow did not follow these guidelines. This, by the way, from Fox News. As you are aware, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Tim Tebow is not the only politically biased FBI agent at the Washington field office. He added the FBI answers to Congress and the American people. No, they don't. They answer to the Presidium, the people behind the Biden regime. Currently, the FBI acts as the secret police, not America's and the world's preeminent federal law enforcement agency. During a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing earlier this month, FBI Director Christopher Wray called the whistleblower allegations deeply troubling. Oh my God, that's deeply troubling. What are you going to do about it? Man, that's deeply troubling. Yeah, are you going to be able to remediate any of this? Man, this is so deeply troubling. He promised the whistleblowers would be protected and removed Tebow from his supervisory role. He was one of 13 assistant special agents in charge of the Washington field office. He, by the way, was not involved in the FBI raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate earlier this year at any level. Well, no, because he's too busy working on keeping the political prisoners from the January 6th peaceful protest in jail. The FBI said that it doesn't comment on personnel matters. My, that's deeply troubling. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. If you find this show valuable, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe to it. Please, if you choose to support this broadcast, contribute. Go to www.patreon.com/The Wells Report, and you can make a financial donation to this broadcast. I promise I'll take good care of the money. And I'll continue to do this work. Because as you know, I'm essentially in a brave new world. I used to work for ABC, Clear Channel Communications, CBS Radio. I used to work for Cumulus. Now I work for John David Productions, my own company. And I have a vast staff of people that I would really like to be able to pay, specifically me and Jube. Me and Jube. That's it. I really would like to be able to pay Jube and me. I really would. If you'd like to help, that'd be great. Even though it really freaks me out to ask. So we were just talking about Facebook. We were just talking about how Facebook is an entire entity that has no problem with censorship in the United States, even though the First Amendment of the Constitution, both specifying free speech and a free press, is clearly intent on making sure that there's truth in the public square. Whether you agree with it or not is completely up to you. However, the idea that there would be free speech and a free press is not really up for debate. But Facebook proved that there is no such thing, at least as far as they're concerned. They have no problem whatsoever with censorship, even though the free speech and free press clause in the Bill of Rights talks about eradicating censorship, which is what it should be doing, but it doesn't. ABC, CBS, NBC, they will absolutely refuse to censor the news, or at least appear to be censoring the news, but they don't have any problem propagandizing the news. You see, you can propagandize by reporting part of the story. You can propagandize by not reporting any of the story. And, of course, they're doing it for political reasons. Let me give you an example. This from Brian Flood of Fox News. ABC, CBS, and NBC have decided to stop reporting on the Taliban taking Afghanistan back following the botched withdrawal of U.S. troops last August. Coverage on the evening newscasts have dropped to a measly 7 seconds in July. That's among all three. Last week, NBC's Today, ABC's Good Morning America, CBS Mornings failed to recognize it was exactly 1 year since the August 26th, 2021 terror attack outside Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport. 11 Marines, 1 Army soldier, and an Army corpsman dead. But skipping the somber 1-year mark of the suicide bomb that killed 13 American soldiers isn't the only thing that indicates broadcast networks are moving past Afghanistan coverage. The conservative watchdog Media Research Center analyzed evening newscasts on ABC, NBC, and CBS and found a staggering decline in coverage in a study headlined Chaos: 1 year of the networks hiding Biden's Afghanistan disaster. ABC's World News Tonight, NBC's Nightly News, CBS Evening News spent 409 minutes and 12 seconds on Afghanistan in August 2021. The number evaporated to 7 seconds in July of 2022. So much for the free press. So do you suppose these media companies, including social media companies, you suppose these companies ought to be constitutionally compliant? Not just the actual words, but the actual intent. You can find that, by the way, in the Federalist Papers. It's actually called the Federalist. Yeah, you see, that's the thing. I believe that corporations doing business in the United States should be constitutionally compliant. But they're not, are they? So what's going on? Well, the networks are both losing influence and money. It's not just the networks. 1 year after Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013, 1 year after he purchased, the Post's business has stalled. The breakneck news pace of the Trump administration has faded away. Readers have turned elsewhere. The paper's push to expand beyond Beltway coverage hasn't compensated for the loss. Yeah. The organization is on track to lose money in 2022 after years of profitability, according to two people with knowledge of the company's finances. The Post now has fewer than the 3 million paying digital subscribers it had hailed internally near the end of 2020. According to several people in the organization, digital ad revenue generated by the Post fell to roughly $70 million during the first half of the year, 15% lower than the first half of 2021. Fred Ryan, chief executive and publisher, in recent weeks floated with newsroom leaders the possibility of cutting 100 positions. See, it's not just the Washington Post, it's CNN. Chris Licht. Chris Licht is just plain ending the tenure of people who propagandize instead of report. Washington Post, with Jeff Bezos' money, they can do pretty much anything they want to, up to a point, until people stop contributing money to the Washington Post. They're going to lose $70 million? Really? Well, they fell roughly to $70 million during the first half of the year, 15% lower. They're losing money. They're talking about cutting 100 positions. Let's see what else. Mediaite reports on the Washington Post as well. The Washington Post set to lose money in 2022. Times Media reporters Benjamin Mullen and Katie Robertson, citing several sources at the Post, said that Tuesday the Post now has fewer than 3 million paying digital prescribers. Citing an internal financial document, Mullen and Robertson reported digital ad revenue generated by the Post fell 15%. Post newsroom considering cutting 100 positions. What about NBC? The executive producer of Meet the Press, who NBC announced last week is shifting to the streaming side, was pushed out amid the Sunday politics show's ratings woes. Meet the Press, the oldest continuous television broadcast in American broadcasting history. John Rice, who had been the EP for the last 8 years, executive producer, was officially punted over to NBC News, the NBC News Now streaming service. David P. Gellis, a longtime CNN producer who helped develop the now defunct CNN Plus streamer, was parachuted in to help fix the sinking show, which is down 21% in total viewership, 24% in key advertising demos. Gellis' first order of business, multiple sources said, is deciding what to do about Chuck Todd, who despite recently signing a 2-year extension, has baffled many at NBC with how long he's remained atop the struggling show. NBC White House correspondent Kristen Welker is being groomed to replace Todd, multiple insiders with knowledge of the matter said, and is expected to take more hosting duties on as the midterm elections approach. Well, here's what they've got to do. They've got to start reporting the news. They've got to start discussing the news. That's what Meet the Press is all about. You take newsmakers, and what you do is you report the news. And then you have people on both sides of the question tell you what they think about the news. Your job is to not opine about the news. I know, I do that. But I tell you that. If I was the host of Meet the Press, I'm sorry, I probably should be. All I'd be doing is asking pertinent questions. I wouldn't be opining at all, unless the producers of the broadcast and the network told me to. In which case I'd say, sure, but I want to make sure that there's a super up there that says commentary. And I would say, this is my commentary. This is my opinion. And I'd also say, I really want people to be able to reach out and tell me why I'm full of it. That's what I want. I want people to be able to interact. That's what I would do. I report the news. Get both sides of the question. Ask them important questions. Make them explain what they're trying to get across. I wouldn't allow people to not answer questions. And if they somehow were able to wriggle away from asking questions or answering the questions that I ask, I'd never have them on again. Ever. I'd simply write them off. If I was the host to Meet the Press, be a different broadcast. Because it has to be. But this is what happens when the mainstream media abandons the truth and chooses sides. It's finally catching up to them. It's been decades. It's finally catching up. Report the news. Ask the newsmakers hard questions, not unfair ones, hard ones. Cut to the chase. Clarify their story. And then have a discussion. Get notable pundits. Put them around a table. Ask them questions. Listen to their response. Ask follow-up questions to sharpen their response. But do you opine? No. Not on Meet the Press. Yes, I do hear. And as I've said, I struggle with it. I do. Because there is more to the news. I don't have the NBC Meet the Press staff. I don't have an executive producer any longer, although I had the best one in the business. Vicky Stifer was the best executive producer anybody ever had and anybody ever will have. I don't have the bully pulpit of Meet the Press. I don't have the luxury of not communicating and commenting on the news. But what I do have is you. Not a lot of people call this show. It baffles me. It happened a while ago. I guess people are more interested in listening instead of opining with me. I have been harsh with some people that have, not because of what they were saying, not because of their disagreements with me, but because they were being jackasses. They were being disrespectful, not just to me, but to the entire concept of what we do. Bye-bye. I haven't been harsh with people, but I have forced them to confront the propaganda they're trying to push because that's my job. And I'm perfectly willing to listen to what people say. Okay, here's one. I refuse to discuss the findings from the January 6th hearings. I'm now criticizing Facebook and news outlets. In point of fact, I did discuss the findings of the January 6th hearings. What I didn't do is cover the hearings themselves. Why? Because they weren't hearings. They were monologues. I pointed out that I wasn't going to do it because it wasn't fair. It wasn't straightforward. There was no check, no balance. There was no debate. There was no exculpatory information. I am not someone that is bound by politics or coercion to cover a lynch mob. And that's exactly what the January 6th committee was and is. That's all it is. Anybody disagreeing with the January 6th committee is obviously an idiot. Yeah. So anyway, the invitation to debate is open. You may not like my answer, but at least have the debate. But it was the news. They presented tons of information. Now, once again, you're forgetting a few words in that sentence. They presented tons of one-sided information. Where's the rest of the information? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judge called out White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre today. It happened today. This from Fox News. She raised eyebrows by claiming migrants are not just walking in across the southern border. I watch these people walk across the border every single day. We see it. It's disgusting what we're seeing. And she knows exactly what's happening, but she's deflecting. She's lying. She knows the mainstream media is not going to cover the issue. During a press briefing, Fox News' Peter Doocy asked Jean-Pierre about the White House's policy on unvaccinated travelers coming into the United States. He used an example of Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic, who's been barred from participating in the U.S. Open due to his refusal to take the COVID-19 vaccine. You know, he could have just walked across the border, south of the border. He could have just walked across. Probably would have had to take a 50-pound bale of marijuana with him. But they probably would either Washington would have immediately processed him and sent him to New York City, or Governor Abbott of Texas would do the same thing, and he wouldn't even have to pay. Yeah. But how is it, by the way, but how is it two different things? Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane, they say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated, they're allowed to stay. Why? But it's not like somebody walks over and that's exactly what happened, said Peter Doocy. Judd said the White House does not care about the border crisis. They don't care that hundreds of thousands of people are dying because of drug overdoses. Because of these illegal immigrants that are coming across the borders illegally, the cartels create opportunities. They don't care what's currently happening. They know it's not hurting them, so they're going to continue to lie to the American public. Judd exposed the hypocrisy of not allowing Djokovic to play in the U.S. Open, yet migrants continue to be released with no regard for COVID. Only half the people are turned back. We're releasing the rest of them into the United States. Let's be clear, we're not even testing these individuals. We don't know if they have COVID, let alone the rest of the diseases that come from around the world. Polio's back. Where'd that come from? Yeah. Yep. You see, it's a lot easier for news organizations to lie when credible sources lie to them. When someone tries to call them out for it, well, obviously they're just terrible people. They're not playing ball. So they don't get to sit up front and ask questions. Somehow Peter Doocy manages. Good for him. It's important. Make no mistake, Karine Jean-Pierre is in a tight spot. She is. She can't tell the truth. She cannot tell the truth. So what she has to do is she has to craft a lie. Something that could be reasonably asserted to be true, which is propaganda. People ask hard questions, but not too many. Not too many. But anyway, it's really, really a tough job. I feel for Karine Jean-Pierre because she cannot say what she should say because she cannot tell the truth. So why bother? Why bother having a press conference in the first place? Why have a press availability when you can't tell the truth? What are you going to do about the hundreds of thousands of people that walk across the border every month? What are you going to do? Attack the question? Oh, they don't just walk across the border. Yes, they do. But you didn't answer the question. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to argue about whether they walk over or swim over or fly over? They're put on catapults and bolted over? Answer the question. What are you going to do about these people? Oh, well, we're going to bus them to Cleveland and Springfield and Orem, Utah. We're going to send them in the middle of the night. But God curse Greg Abbott for sending illegal aliens to New York City and Washington, D.C. What's the difference? The difference is that Greg Abbott's being honest about it. See, Karine Jean-Pierre can't say, yes, we're resettling them in various cities around the nation. Excuse me, those cities around the nation, are they avowed sanctuary cities like so many are? No. Yes. See, she can't tell the truth. So what she has to do is she has to figure out a way to wriggle out one way or another. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is still 817-379-2172. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast today. I sincerely appreciate it. We'll be here again tomorrow for Fishing Shirt Friday. No, wait, but tomorrow's Wednesday. See, I was getting all excited. Yeah. I was actually telling myself while I said that, don't forget about Fishing Shirt Friday, and then it came out of my mouth. Oops. Have yourself a wonderful evening. God bless all y'all. And until tomorrow, this has been The Wells Report. Take good care. Okay, so I'm not being awful. You're being hypocritical. I can hardly wait for the Langston report. Langston, go out there and show me how it's done. All witnesses testified under oath under penalty of perjury. You didn't want to watch it because it would reflect poorly on Donald Trump. Did you listen to the answers? Did you listen to the answers? To the best of my knowledge, to the best of my memory, did anybody say, were you actually there? Did you actually hear this with your own ears? No. I was told this by somebody else, so it's hearsay information. Is that right? Yes. Oh, I see. 95% of the witnesses worked under President Trump. That brings credibility to their testimony. It's newsworthy. No, it's not newsworthy. It's a lynch mob. Okay? There is editorial policy. That doesn't make me a hypocrite. By the way, Langston, if you truly believe that, I don't want to ever see you again. Ever. Okay? If you have a problem with my editorial policy, I don't want to ever see you again. Be gone. Cool? Great. Take good care, and I'll look forward to the Langston report. I'm sure it'll be a much better, more fair broadcast, because God knows you've been fair with me on this chat room, haven't you? All right, that's all I have. Take good care. I'll see you again tomorrow, okay? Until tomorrow, make good decisions. Be safe.